Bun găsit, doamnelor și domnilor, sunt Marius Constantinescu, iar dumneavoastră urmăriți o nouă ediție a emisiunii Tură, prin cultură, evident, la TVR3. Astăzi la Tură prin cultură, portret de fotograf. Ion Zupcu, artist fotograf pornit din România și adoptat de Statele Unite ale Americii, mai precis de New York, oraș de a cărui estetică și de a cărui creativitate s-a contaminat cu bucurie și căruia i-a împrumutat din linia rectilinie și din minimalism. De la Ansel Adams la Ion Zupcu, o trecere prin revistă astăzi la TVR3.
I was 6 years old, 7 years old. We used to collect stamps, and I was attracted by Rembrandts and 16th, 17th century painters. So I had a great collection of that. My brother, being older than me with 7 years, he was more into technical aspects of photography, and he was start doing photography. Late after 8 p.m. when parents went to bed. We turned the lights off on the kitchen and put the trays with the chemicals, and we start working there. He was doing the exposure. I was passing the paper, the photographic paper, to all the chemists to the trays. So that's pretty much when it started.
What do you most like to photograph?
Well, I've been through a few phases. I did commercial photography, obviously, in Romania, studio work, weddings, and so on. But when I came here, for 2 or 3 years, I was in love with Ansel Adams' work. I've tried landscape, but I just find myself repeating the technique, the composition, the framing of what Ansel Adams was doing. And the main reason I stopped was because it was something in front of the camera that I would like to be moved, and I couldn't do at that time. You cannot move physically a tree that was in the composition. So I started working in front of the camera and back of the camera. So that's how the still life pretty much started, and came to the conclusion that our own lives are on stage. So I would like to stage the photography that I'm going to photograph.
This is very Shakespearean,
I remember very well 1986, and that was my first visit to APAD, which is an art fair show for photography galleries. Usually 80 galleries all over the world are coming to New York. And then I have noticed Ansel Adams, Michael Kenna, and all other photographers from $3,000 to up to $100,000. So that's how I became pretty much self-educated, if I can say that.
Absolutely. Well, you have already mentioned Ansel Adams, and of course I was going to ask you, are there other artists in photography or in visual arts, generally speaking, that still represent an inspiration for you even today?
Well, actually, as soon as I started doing my still life photography, I became more interested into painters, abstract painters, conceptual art, sculpture mostly. I really appreciate for the past 10 years, I'm really appreciating, study and read and look and visit the architectural sites. So architects are great influence for me. And lately, the last body of work, Ediţia on glass, is pretty much inspired by the music of Philip Glass.
Since you've already mentioned Ansel Adams and moving to another artistic field, music, specifically Philip Glass, this leads me to a certain minimalism in both form and expression when it comes to your artistic discourse. Now, your works, at least as I have got to see them, are also characterized by this specific minimalism. That is visible also in the way you construct them. Are you a fan of minimalism in all its creative sides and aspects?
Yes, well, minimalism came to me as soon as I arrived here in New York City, Manhattan specifically. And then it's related to a lot of aspects, including the conversation that you have to reduce your conversation. People don't have time for you. I reduce everything. So, it's like if you listen to Beethoven, it's abstract at the end of the day. Absolutely, it's an abstract music. So I find a simple line, it's either in a certain shape, can express so many things. Body language can express a feeling, a mind image that you have. So that's why I'm attracted to abstract. And then we have Brancusi, that he went down to the essence.
You have said earlier that you have discovered this way of being and way of expressing through a minimal form and through a minimal shape when you first got to New York. Now, I was going to ask you, what did America teach you about the arts world in general, and you didn't know when you first arrived there?
Well, as you probably know, everything is up in terms of art is happening here in New York. The end of 90s, there were so many galleries that they were just doing photography, fine art photography. So, that has a huge impact. That tells you that whatever you think, you're not the only one. You can make a living doing just that. And then it's such a large variety, visions, and then in terms of approaching, and that what turned me into a minimalist is just Manhattan itself, where you just have vertical and horizontal lines most of the time.
How did you adjust to art being a real business, something that also America has taught the rest of us?
You just became aware and you just go with the flow. I'm self-educated. I didn't go to any art schools. I read, and I'm going even these days at least twice a month to the city, doing the galleries rounds, doing the museums. So I'm aware of what's happening, and then more than that is just the internet that offers you everything. I'm doing drawings, and then when it comes, I take a decision to go in a certain direction. Everything else is coming unconsciously based on everything that I've seen lately and what influenced me and what moves me lately. So that's how it goes.
Are you currently being represented by one or maybe more American galleries for the American market?
Yes, I do have at this moment, I have two galleries representing my work. One is Clamp Art Gallery in New York City, and the other one is Ellen Miller Gallery in Boston, Massachusetts.
I have browsed both your websites, and I have seen there many of your photographic series. They are studies, or should I say études, that are an ongoing process. Are they actually a permanent work in progress, or do you see a certain conclusion to them as time goes by?
The series that I have usually takes from 2 to 3 years, and I'm working all this time. I create many images, and then when I'm getting close, I do editing, and I will end up anywhere from 15 to 20 to 30 images maximum. But that's pretty much the end of a series.
When you look at someone else's pictures, what does touch you the most? I mean, instantly, the first glimpse.
I have 3 things that I do. I go way back, probably like 4 or 5 meters in front of the piece. Depends how large it is. I get closer, and then I even get even closer. I look at details. I noticed what is into that image. I notice the color. I notice the space. I notice the shape, the form. I read the title. I would like to read the title, see what's the title. Most of the time it's untitled. Sometimes, if you're going to the museum, and I would recommend that to everyone, when you get into a museum and to a particularly solo show, it must be somewhere, a text. I would like to read that text, especially if I do not know anything about that artist. So I put all this together in my mind, and it will stay with me. Eventually, I pull out my cell phone, and I take a picture, and I have, that stays with me in my pocket.
When you take the time to make a few steps behind and contemplate your own body of work, what do you see?
I put dates to my artwork. Because if I'm going back and I see, for example, I have March 6, 2004, when I did the circle from my works on paper, I know the mood I was in. This is my journey in art. I know where I started way 20-something years ago, and I just was taking photographs of flowers, pretty average, nothing exceptional, and then. This is a personal story. And then in 1996, I worked with my wife in the Museum of Modern Art, and I've seen a famous painting by Jasper Johns, the American flag. And I looked at it. We were visiting to see Brancusi on 3rd floor. And I looked at that flag, and I couldn't understand why that is in a museum. It's just American flag. It's a reproduction of American flag. So I get back home and I thought, well, there are smarter people in the museum than me, so they decided to put that, and why? And that's how I turned from traditional photography, I turned into, appreciate the modern and contemporary aspect of art. But it took me a few good years.
Doamnelor, domnilor, o nouă ediție a emisiunii Tură prin cultură pe TVR3 i-a sfârșit aici. Sunt Marius Constantinescu și ca întotdeauna vă spun că ne revedem aici la TVR3.